When you hear the tone, you will be the 14th person to join the meeting. You are now muted.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on the Cisco Security Grand Challenge, a global initiative to secure the Internet of Things. Right now, we're going to wait maybe another minute or two just to make sure that everybody can log on and call in successfully. But we'll begin shortly. So hello, everyone. Welcome again to today's webinar on the Cisco Security Grand Challenge, a global initiative to secure the Internet of Things. My name is Kendall Krofchuk, and I will be your host and moderator for this webinar. I am so pleased to welcome the following speakers to our webinar today. So with us today, we have Dave Evans, Cisco's Chief Futurist, Dr. Tao Zhang, Chief Scientist for Smart Connected Cars at Cisco, and Dr. Kevin Stark, Vice President at 9 Sigma. So for our agenda, we have a lot of exciting things to share with you today about the Cisco Security Grand Challenge. First, Kevin Stark will give a brief introduction of 9 Sigma's role in the challenge. Then Dave Evans will introduce Cisco's vision of the Internet of Things and why this particular security challenge is so unique and important. And then Dr. Tao Zhang will discuss why security solutions are so crucial for the Internet of Things. After this, we will consider the top questions for this challenge before we open up to the audience for a live Q&A section. We'll conclude the webinar with information about what you can do today for the Cisco Security Grand Challenge, including how to register, how to stay connected, and how to submit your entry. Please note as well that this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on the challenge website. Finally, if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to submit them through your Q&A chat box, and we will address them during the live Q&A session at the end.
Hi, this is Kevin Stark from 9 Sigma. So just a few introductory words, and then I'll get out of the way so that you can hear more detail from the Cisco folks. But really, we want to make sure that you understand 9 Sigma's role and sort of set this up. So when we look at grand challenges overall, which is a core part of what 9 Sigma does to interact with our clients to construct and architect these large programs, really what we're trying to do is help enable our clients to achieve a really large objective in terms of addressing an aspirational goal through a challenge context. So in this case, Cisco is really focused on, and as you'll hear more, on really activating interest from the global security community to help address the future of what the Internet of Things, or as you'll hear again today, IoT looks like. And what Cisco is really looking for is innovative solutions to help secure the Internet of Things against different types of cybersecurity threats. And as you'll hear later, there are really three key focus areas that are underlying the motivation for this. So one is malware defense, one is credential management, as well as privacy protection. So as you see, and I'm sure all of you who signed up today have been to the website, and we'll give more links to that. But again, go to the website that's hosted by 9 Sigma, and you'll be able to register there, continue to learn more about the challenge. And really our opportunity today is to help provide more context in terms of what this looks like, why is Cisco tackling this, more detail around those focus areas that Dr. Zhang will talk about later, and then how you can get involved and how you can respond and the logistics as well. So with that, let me just turn it over to Dave Evans and let him take it away. So as with everything, give us a couple of minutes to make sure we can get Dave to speak. So maybe just a quick check. Dave, are you there? We can't hear you yet. And while we're at it, we'll double check. Tao, are you there? So sorry about that. As you can imagine, we're chatting with Dave on the live chat feed, so we know he's there. We're just trying to make sure we can get his audio.
Okay, how about that? Can you now hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Technical difficulties, so apologize for that, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to chat this morning. I wanted just to spend a couple of minutes and sort of remind ourselves why we're here and why security is paramount and top of mind as we connect all of these things to the internet over the coming years. You know, any of us that have been around the internet space for some time recognize that the internet has gone through some pretty distinct phases. We moved from fixed to mobile to now IoT and emerging into the Internet of Everything space. But something really interesting happened in 2008, and that's when the number of things connected to the internet started to exceed the number of people connected to the internet. And we are now dwarfed by the number of things connected. We often think that the network is by and for people, but the reality is that the network now is by and for things. Yes, the people are the recipients of the benefits of all these things being connected, but ultimately it's about billions of things being connected to the network. And today, roughly about 12 billion things are estimated to be connected, but over the course of the next decade, that number is expected to grow to about 50 billion. To put it in perspective, more things will be connected to the internet in the next 4 to 5 years than since the internet began. So the growth of this, all of these things being connected, is something we've never seen before in the technology industry. This is a huge transformation in terms of new capabilities, new experiences, bringing services to those that don't have access to those services today. So this is truly transformational. However, we need to make sure that as we connect all these things, we do it with the right security paradigms in place. Next slide, please. So although we talk about 50 billion things being connected, we know that ultimately 50 billion things are just the beginning. Less than 1% of our world is currently connected to the internet. And said a different way, if you look at all the things that could be connected that exist today, that's about 1.5 trillion things, or about 200 things per person on the planet, that benefit from being connected. And these are not arcane, things that we're talking about. It's not your chair or your sofa. We're talking about real, tangible things that provide benefit: healthcare, consumer devices, enterprise devices, energy systems, lighting, and so on and so forth. Billions upon billions of things will be connected over the coming years. And if you look at sort of Moore's law and Metcalfe's law and the intersection of those two, and you look at advances in compute technology, the ever-shrinking size and ever-increasing compute power of technology, new types of sensors that are not much bigger than a grain of sand, like cameras, MEM sensors where thousands of them can fit on the tip of your finger that can sense the environment, temperature, pressure, light, and so on. As we start to combine these technologies together, and as we connect these things to the internet, we're building a digital nervous system for the planet that provide an unprecedented view of what's going on. Next slide, please. Which means that how we as humans, how we as people are getting connected tomorrow is going to be quite different than the way we're being connected today. So whether it's the glasses that we wear, whether it's the sensors that are on our body that monitor activity or healthcare, whether it's the smart clothing that we wear, or even the pills that we swallow, how we as people connect to the network tomorrow is going to be radically different. Next slide, please. And it's not just how we connect, of course, it's also the things that we connect. If you look at our infrastructure, our energy systems, our transportation systems, our cities, back in the turn of last century, only 3% of the world lived in cities. By mid-century, it'll be about 70% of the population will live in cities. This will put tremendous stress on cities. So we plan to use IoT technology to scale those precious resources and the systems in those cities. So whether it's the car that you drive, today there's about 1 billion cars on the road. By 2050, we expect that number to be about 4 billion cars. The energy systems, the buildings, the lighting, everyday things will be connected. Next slide, please. But also the things that we don't yet expect to be connected. And many of these are consumer devices. In fact, 96.5% of the things connecting to the internet over the coming decade are expected to be consumer devices. So whether it's the thermostat in your home that connects to the weather system to maintain temperature in your home, the asthma inhaler that cross-references its location based on weather conditions, whether it's the slippers that you wear, the car that you drive, all these things are getting connected at record rates. So it's traditional infrastructure, but also, frankly, the things that we don't expect, which is arguably some of the most exciting elements of IoT. Next slide, please. But with this comes great responsibility and arguably great exposure and great risk, and that's ultimately why we're here today. You know, we've seen example after example in the press, whether it's devices being hacked, whether it's credit cards being compromised, of late the Heartbleed, OpenSSL bug, the list goes on and on and on. And it behooves us and the rest of us on this call to come up with solutions to secure the Internet of Things. Next slide. Which is why ultimately we're running this challenge. There's a new landscape emerging. Billions upon billions of things are being connected, arguably one of the largest technology transformations we've ever seen. Orders of magnitude more things, 50 billion is just the beginning, but also the device profiles of these things are very different. They're smaller, they have more compute, they're mobile. Some of them have very rich capabilities to handle complete compute stacks and IP stacks. Some of them don't. Some of them are on the ground, some of them are in the air, some are on net, some are off net. Very different types of personalities and profiles for all of these things. And as I mentioned, some of the things that we don't expect are starting to get connected to the Internet. And those don't require any less security than our traditional infrastructure. And also new types of places are getting connected. It's not just about the things, it's also about the places in which these things inhabit. So whether it's the hospitals, manufacturing floors, energy grids, transportation systems, new places as well as things are getting connected. So therefore, new types of security paradigms and approaches are needed. And frankly, we can't or shouldn't do this alone. You know, Cisco obviously is the backbone of the Internet, but we need the community to work with us, which is why we do things like the IoT World Forum, where we bring together partners and customers to work on some of these challenges together, and which is why we also have the IoT Security Grand Challenge. Next slide. So with that, before I sort of pass over to Tao, the message here is we're entering a very different world, very different profiles for all these different types of things and places that are getting connected. And it's up to all of us to get involved to ensure that this world that we're creating, this digital nervous system for the planet, is a safe, secure environment. We're just at the very beginning. As I mentioned, less than 1% of the world is connected. What does this world look like when it's 10%, 50%, 80%? So we're looking to our partners, our community, to help all of us come together to figure out how to tackle some of these challenges around security. Tao.
Great, thanks, Dave. So while we make sure that we get Tao on the line, I just want to remind everybody that some of the detail that Tao is going to be talking about and digging in more depth into the focus areas, a lot of this is available on the website, CiscoSecurityGrandChallenge.com, and we hope this will provide some more detail and context to understand why these focus areas are really crucial in thinking about how to secure the Internet of Things. So Tao, are you on?
Tao, if you're on mute, hit *6 to unmute.
Tao, if you're having problems, chat with us on the chat window, and we'll see how to help you out.
Hello?
We got you. Go right ahead, Tao. Thanks.
Oh, great. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. When we looked at securing the Internet of Things, what we realized is that Internet of Things imposes a very wide range of very unique security challenges. So we can no longer just simply extend or apply what we have for IT and enterprise security to secure properly the Internet of Things. So that's what's underlying the security challenge, all the three areas. In all the three areas, and we identified a large number of unique challenges, and would like to see solutions and very innovative thoughts on how to address those challenges. So, for example, malware defense. And we are looking at a very wide variety of connected things, from cars to roadside devices and to medical devices, sensors, oil rigs, and even trains. And a lot of those things not only have very constrained resources, but they have very long lifespans. And the resources cannot be easily replaced or even updated during this long lifespan. And then, so how do we secure properly those things in terms of malware defense, for example? And next. You see people already have been considering using cloud-based security services to compensate the constrained resources and capabilities on many of the connected things. And the question over there is, how can you provide those cloud-based security services and, for example, in this case, malware defense, to those various things in a very, very resources-efficient manner? Many of those things we're considering do not have a broadband connectivity. Many of them don't have frequent connectivity. And many of them are in random mobile environment, and like cars, for example. Next. And for malware defense, in order for you to detect new malware, and it's very hard, for example, to expect a lot of those resources-restricted things to rely on themselves alone to defend against malware. And if you have an external entity like in the security cloud to provide to support malware defense, and then there is a very fundamental issue, that is the security cloud will have to know information about the devices and about the attacks and threats that the devices are experiencing, because only the devices very often, they are the only ones who are experiencing this. So they need to let the security cloud know. And the question then is, how do you even gather information in an efficient manner? And how do you determine the trustworthiness of those information? Because in many environments, the connected things can no longer be trusted. And they operate in highly vulnerable environments and very often untrusted environments. Things like cars, for example, sensors and so on belong to those category. A lot of medical devices too. Next. Yeah. And then there are a large number of other uniqueness. I'm not going to go through all of them. The purpose is not to provide a comprehensive list, but rather to provide a few of those as thought starters. And there will be many, many more unique challenges that we need to consider that I'm not going to be able to get into during today's limited time session. So just to sort of mention a few more, for example, and how do you minimize the impact of security breaches? And in critical infrastructures, for example, you don't want to just remove malicious malware, for example, whenever you detect it because you run the risk of removing proper content, and that can actually do a lot of damage, sometimes even more than the malware itself. And how do you minimize the user inconvenience, for example, if you are doing malware defense configuration update, and now how do you prevent successful attacks from scaling? And for example, if I were able to break into one car, if that makes it possible for me to break into all the other cars of the same model, that will be really, really scary. And by the way, that's what people can do easily today. Next. So, okay. So, considering those unique issues, and we were hoping to work with the industry to really create solutions that can address those unique issues. And yeah. So in terms of the requirement, I think we'll mention them later. So let's skip it now. Let's go to the next one. Yeah. The next area that we thought was important is security credential management. Again, and in order to secure those various things, and the very first thing we need to have is a base of trust. And a major portion of that creating trust is to manage security credentials, keys, or even certificates and other security credential materials. And question number one, unique challenge number one, is how to manage those security credentials for very resources constrained things again. And in many cases, how do you even manage the security credentials for their spare parts? Take cars, for example, and a very fundamental difference between a car and a computer is that you have to protect the microcomputers on the car separately, while you don't have to protect spare parts for your computer separately. But spare parts to a car needs to be protected separately, and there are billions of them. And how do you manage credentials on those spare parts? So when a random part, for example, gets on a random car, it works with the other devices already on the car. Next. And how do you support the growing peer-to-peer security relations? And one of the things that are emerging in Internet of Things is that there will be a lot more peer-to-peer security relations. Take cars again, just as an example. When two random cars get close to each other, they need to exchange information, for example, safety information. How do they trust each other? And those credentials very often can be misused. They can be misused without breaking into the devices. For example, you can manipulate inputs to a sensor collector to a car's communication device to have the device to transmit false information. And that, very often, in many cases, can cause deadly effects. And how do you detect those misused credentials? Next. Yeah. And then after that, how do you handle those misused credentials? Do you want to get rid of them? If you don't get rid of them, and those devices can be continuously used to perform attacks to you. If you want to get rid of them, as you all know, removing credentials and it's not a trivial issue. So what should we do? Next. And among all of this, you have to do every one of those in a scale that's applicable to IoT scales. We're talking about in every single vertical, and tens of millions to hundreds of millions, even billions of devices even today. Next. Yeah, so very similarly, we were hoping to work with the industry to come up with not only a scalable but very manageable and easy to use systems that can address those unique issues. Next. The third and the last area of focus in the Grand Challenge is privacy protection. And as more and more things are connected and more data are collected and exchanged by people, by the government, and by your service providers, the privacy concern is increasing. And we see that almost in every single IoT vertical, not only just in medical e-health services, but also in transportation and also in other verticals. So then there are two very fundamental questions. One of them is how do you properly protect the privacy of the data when you exchange them and also when you store them, especially when you store them in the cloud. And the second one is, and we have to really balance the privacy protection needs with data utility. So today, for example, people filter data out, filter your name out, filter your birthday out from the data. And so two things happen when you do that in today's technology. One of them is that you really you started to reduce the utility of the data significantly. And so the other thing is that even with all of those measures, and because we're getting so many data streams, so many varieties of data, with today's simple filtering technology, and people can still very easily correlate a bunch of data in different categories to easily identify people. There are statistics, there are studies that said actually it doesn't take that much and for people to identify you, and even if they don't say your name, they don't say your birthday in the data and so on. So then the question is, how can we provide an adequate level of privacy to consumers, and but in the same time do not degrade the data utility significantly. So I will stop here, and as I was saying in the beginning, the goal is to describe some of those unique issues as thought starters. We welcome the industry to basically address even more unique issues. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave and Tao. So now we'll turn to Kevin Stark to focus on the top questions asked about this challenge before they turn it over to you, the audience, for live questions.
And again, as you think of things, please go ahead and fill up the Q&A queue using your Q&A chat window, and we'll be collecting those and working through those as well. But we wanted to make sure to leave plenty of time for the next half hour to address various things. Go ahead. Next slide. So one of the things we did want to really focus on initially is, again, how do I make a submission? So, of course, go to CiscoGrandChallenge.com or go to the 9 Sigma sort of clearinghouse for where we host all of our challenges, 9sites.com, NINESIGHTS.com. So to submit an entry, we want you to hit the website. We hope a lot of you have been there as well. We have a submission template. We have a submission template that is should make it easy to respond. And hang on a second. We have a submission template to make it easy to respond, and it needs to be submitted mid-June in order to be considered. So we do require you to pre-register, so we obviously don't want you to wait to the very last second to do that. So please get in there soon, register for that, and that'll help you out. Once you download the response template, you'll notice instructions. We're really looking for about 4 to 6 pages to allow you to make your case for what you're trying to accomplish. And you are also allowed 2 attachments to provide supplemental information. So to build on that a little bit, what should a proposal include? So in looking at the website, really It's a detailed description of your proposed approach. Do you have any results, either analytical or empirical, showing feasibility, scalability, performance, and technical maturity is an important one. Is this something that you've been piloting, or have you found use for it in a specific application, or even better in an IoT type setting? Any way that you can differentiate what you're doing that makes that better from other solutions. Case studies are always a fantastic way for you to make your case and show an example of how you've made an impact in the security arena with what you've been working on. And then, of course, we do want you to provide some dialogue around where that can be applied to all the other of the IoT examples that Dave and Tao talked about. So an important element that we always want to address right up front is what does intellectual property look like? Will my submission become the property of Cisco? And if you look at the terms and conditions, again, there's very detailed information on the challenge website. The answer is no. You retain all ownership rights for your entry. You can continue to use it for any purpose. We do require that your submissions are non-confidential, and really the overall objective is for Cisco to really activate this community and get people thinking critically and working to apply their solutions into an IoT framework. And of course, there's prizes available based on what they deem are sort of the best responses, and there's always the opportunity beyond that just to work with Cisco going forward to see how to implement those. So how will we talked about responses are due June 17th. So when will we announce winners? Cisco recently put out a press release that they're really spearheading an IoT World Forum, which will be held October 14th through 16th in Chicago, and that'll be the point where they're really announcing those. They'll select up to 6 winners, and they'll have an internal panel of Cisco experts that will be evaluating those and making those decisions. And then what does that, and I'm sorry, I'm talking faster than they're clicking through. Go ahead. So what does the award look like? So Cisco has committed $300,000 in prize money. So for up to 6 winners, that will look like between $50,000 and $75,000 awarded to each winner. And again, the IoT World Forum in Chicago that Cisco is really spearheading will be an opportunity to showcase those winners. And for those winners, they'll be offered the opportunity to give a brief presentation about their winning solution at that forum. So again, another way to network, another way to get your technology capability visible to a broader audience. And then the last thing we do want to highlight is, as Dave indicated earlier, there is another grand challenge that Cisco's running that is focused more on IoT innovation. And so just to showcase that one is more intended for early stage startups that are using IoT technologies to change business contexts. And so again, the Security Grand Challenge that we're talking about today is more for kind of that global security community to focus on addressing threats that are, as Tao talked about, are unique to an IoT environment. So if you're interested in the other Grand Challenge, we can point you there, cisco.com/go/IoT challenge. And with that, please open it up for questions. Looks like we're getting a couple here and there. And so I'll have Kendall read them off, and then if I can address them specifically, that's great. And otherwise, I may call on Tao and Dave to answer them. But Tao and Dave, feel free to jump in as well to build on these.
So remember that all questions are going to be answered. If we don't get to your question during this live Q&A session, we will answer them after the webinar in writing. And all questions and answers will then be made available on the challenge website. All right, so we've had some fantastic questions coming in already. One of the first ones is, do I have to submit a solution to one of the specific subcategories?
Yeah, so that's a great question. If you are familiar with other grand challenges that 9 Sigma has been running over the past couple of years, typically there are very discrete subtopics with different objectives we're trying to achieve for each. And we do often, in collaboration with our clients, determine that we need you to select one of those subcategories, and your response will be evaluated within that subcategory. In this context for this grand challenge, that's not the case. And again, as Tao had indicated, even though malware protection, credential authentication, and privacy are three really important areas that are of interest in the context of looking at IoT security, there could be solutions that address one or more of those in a nice fashion. And so we do want you, if you're addressing one, two, or all three of those, to talk about that in your response, but you do not need to highlight that you're responding to a specific subcategory.
Great. So next one is, do you expect the prototypes to have been implemented before submitting a proposal?
Sure. So that's a great question. And again, Cisco's real objective is to try to help move this industry forward. So if you have a prototype to talk about, that's really outstanding. Of course, in the context of a non-confidential response, we want you to be very careful and sort of disclose the outcomes that you can have without too much detail on how you're achieving that. So that will be considered, and that can be a plus. But you don't have to have a prototype in place. And of course, since Cisco is looking to really move this forward, they'll be evaluating against a number of criteria, and very breakthrough early stage opportunities are of interest just as much as deployed solutions or prototypes as well. And Tao, maybe, Tao or Dave, do you have any other comments on that you would like to build on?
Not from me. I think you summarized it well.
Yeah, great. I mean, obviously prototypes are always good because it sort of validates the concept. Whether or not it's been implemented is perhaps less relevant. There might be considerations around if it's been implemented, what were the terms of that implementation that we'd have to consider. So I think if we had our druthers, it would be ideal to have a prototype that validates the concept but has not yet been implemented. That's sort of the easier model.
Great.
Fantastic. Okay, next we have, will it be important for me to showcase a specific Internet of Things example to illustrate my approach and solution?
So that's a nice point. I mean, I obviously think, and maybe Dave and Tao could build on this, but I think any opportunity to showcase how what you're doing is not just adaptable to the Internet of Things, but is already in place in one application. So I think we'd be very excited to see something that's looking at energy grid protection and is already trying to address that. And if in your response you can talk about how the elements of what you're doing there can translate to a connected car environment or healthcare scenario, I think would be a very interesting way to showcase that element and how it can be successfully translated to other applications.
Yeah, I agree. This is Dave. I mean, anything that sort of shows a prototype that shows something from in a real use case versus simply conceptual, it definitely has added value. It makes it more tangible and more real if it's applied to a specific use case. So that would be the preference, but not a requirement.
Great. Okay. Another question was asked, must a submission be submitted by a single entity, or can it come from a partnership of two or more companies?
Yeah, again, that's a great comment. Obviously, from a challenge logistics perspective, we do need to understand if there is a team around that or sort of a lead organization or institution, but we absolutely want to consider a variety of different types of groups that could be responding. So I think when we talk about we want to activate the global security community, we mean that very literally. If you're sitting out there as an individual with an interesting solution a firm that's already deploying and has commercialized solutions with new things on the horizon, and sort of anything in between, whether it's university, academic, other research type lab, or team, we certainly want to hear what that looks like.
Okay, and another one is, can I submit already patented solutions?
So that's a good point, and let me also sort of reinforce the other point we touched on earlier about intellectual property ownership. So if you have something that you have already patented, you already have intellectual property ownership over, that's perfectly fine. Again, Cisco is not implying in any way that they will be receiving ownership. You still retain the rights to your technology or solution. And I think that's an added benefit if you have something that, again, as Dave talked about, has been deployed, is showing commercial promise, the uniqueness around it. If it's patented, then there's obviously something differentiating and unique about that. So, of course, you can showcase that. Again, we'll say it. We can't say it too many times. Make sure your proposal is non-confidential. You have to affirm that when you submit, but that's certainly within bounds.
Okay. Another one is, are solutions limited to only cloud-based approaches?
So maybe let me punt that to either Tao or Dave to address. I'm sure that we're looking for more wide-ranging than just sort of cloud-based. So maybe if you want to comment on some nuance of what's more interesting than not, that would be helpful.
You're absolutely right, and we're not limiting the solutions to only cloud-based solutions at all. And for the malware defense, for example, I used a cloud-assisted framework to outline some of the unique challenges, but that's not to say that that's the solution framework that you ought to follow. No, not at all.
Let's take that one offline. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, another one is, does Cisco take any ownership of the result of work done as a result of an award?
Sure, so that's a good point, and I've touched on that before, but I think that's an important nuance. The awards that Cisco gives really don't come with any strings attached. The real outcome, of course, is it's a way to highlight that you have something very interesting and that Cisco has an interest to possibly follow up with you more and see where to take that forward. But no, the exchange of an award amount, you're not giving up anything in order to receive that from a legal perspective.
Okay, another question just came in. Are you more interested in applied solutions rather than basic research results?
So we touched on that a little bit, but maybe Dave or Tao, if you want to provide some color as to how, I guess, more sort of academic approaches are or are not of interest.
Yeah, I think we would lean towards applied versus purely academic, because some of the academic work may be too early, theoretical, not implementable type of thing, whereas applied is a little more tangible. Al?
Yes, I would agree. We do recognize that there are issues that need a lot of work that may not be readily available today, that need some further development, further research, but that's all right. So, but as Dave was saying, we would prefer to see more applied results, meaning that you need to show the feasibility. And you don't have to show feasibility with an implementation per se, but you have to demonstrate feasibility, you have to demonstrate achievability.
Okay, and another question that's being asked is it possible to submit more than one proposal?
So I think we're absolutely not restricting you to only one proposal. Obviously, we leave it to your judgment to consider if you're going to submit a couple different things. Encourage you to make sure that there's really something unique as opposed to just saying the same thing and reapplying it a few different ways. But again, that's what we're trying to give you guidance on the type of information that's interesting, the type of proposal we'd like to see, and really leave it to the community to determine the best way for you to make your case and make your submission as complete and powerful as possible. But you're definitely not restricted to only submitting one proposal.
Okay, so the next question is there a preference for submissions from smaller companies or individual researchers?
So again, I think what we'll reinforce is we're very open to seeing that, but maybe Dave and Tao, if you have some specific thoughts about that, go ahead and share them.
No, I don't know that there's a specific preference. I think we're receptive to all of the above.
Right. Yeah. Great solutions can come from anywhere, anyone.
Great. Okay, another question is, if we want to demonstrate the capability of our solutions, what are the parameters that we need to consider? That is, how many IoT devices do we need to simulate or emulate, the type of network topology of the Internet of Things, et cetera?
I think it's going to depend on the application. For example, if you're proposing something for, let's say, automotive, and you anticipate there being billions of cars or endpoints, then you should at least show either in practice or through math that the solution will scale in that fashion. It's not reasonable for us to expect someone to simulate all real-world scenarios, because that's just, the resources to do that would not be practical. So if there were a way to show through, showing it through a few smaller number, but then through architecture designs or what have you, that yes, this solution could scale as needed, scale linearly, then that would be relevant.
Yes, and also it will be interesting and very, very helpful to show the increased scalability compared to other existing solutions.
Okay, fantastic. Another person is directly asking Tao a question. How is the current market addressing security issues? For example, the automobile market.
Yes. So take automobile, for example. There are a large number of vulnerabilities that have been identified by people. There are a large number of threats that have been performed by various groups and researchers and so on. And so the auto industry is waking up to this recently, and some of the automakers are just plainly scared. Long story short, and there are a very, very heavy attention and also effort being devoted by the auto industry and their suppliers and the technology companies working with the auto industry to solve the problem. And in the same time, you already notice the lack or the insufficient security for connected cars is already preventing many applications from being installed. And so that's actually becoming a roadblock. When something becomes a roadblock to applications, and that will cause people to pay even more attention. And as you know, when security is something that people tend to not to pay sufficient attention until sort of a bad thing happens. And so today, what you see on the cars are drastically insufficient to secure your cars. Really, we have discovered, and also so has the research community and other companies as well, have discovered a very wide range of attacks that can be performed in very practical manner using low-cost, off-the-shelf commercial devices, and in very short time period to do harm to your car remotely. And so that's very scary. And many of the security solutions today are not sufficient. For example, malware defense for cars are far from sufficient. And the credential management, I'll give you an example. All the spare parts of an electronic control unit on cars are now currently programmed, most of them, I wouldn't say all, and overwhelming majority of them are pre-configured with the same set of security keys, just so that when a spare car gets on a random car, the spare parts ECU get on a random car, it actually works with the things on it. And people have broken virtually every single ECU out there. So those are sort of the issues. As you can see, similar issues apply also to other IoT verticals. So to answer your question in connected car domain, and there is a big gap from what people have today and where it should be. And it's always also in a balance between the cost and the requirement, of course. And you have also a legacy system, and cars have tens to over 100 ECUs on them. A lot of them are performing simple tasks. So it makes no sense to increase their capability just to support security. And by the way, those cars, once you sold them, you can't change anything on them very easily. So then you ask yourself the question, and my CPU is getting old on the car, my memory is getting insufficient, and how am I going to defend my car against malware, for example, right? Similar questions happen and apply to other verticals, for example, your medical devices and the sensors and the small sensor collectors out there in the field and others.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tao. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So the last one is, does Cisco provide any infrastructure or platforms so that we can test our solutions?
So that's a good question. And again, the way that this grand challenge was constructed was to keep it very simple and make it, I mean, we're really looking for paper-written responses for people to submit along with additional attachments or documentation. But really with the goal, of course, as you see from the Grand Challenge website, if you visit Cisco.com, you'll see a lot of information about the Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything. And a real key element of this is Cisco really wanted to take a leadership role to move this forward. And so where the Grand Challenge fits in that is one mechanism to better connect with that community, identify interesting people, interesting technologies, interesting organizations, so that they can see how to move forward with that. So again, not speaking for precisely the mechanism of what will happen after awards are made, there's certainly the opportunity to see how to collaborate with Cisco going forward.
All right, thank you so much. So we've had a few more questions come in. We don't have time to answer them live, but remember that we will answer them in writing and put a transcript of the Q&A on to the challenge website, as well as a recorded version of this entire webinar. So again, thank you all for an engaging Q&A session. This concludes our webinar for today. So for additional information, we encourage you to visit the challenge website, which is ciscosecuritygrandchallenge.com. And there you can sign up to stay up to date on the challenge and also receive more information on the submission process. So do remember that the deadline for submissions is Tuesday, June 17th, 2014. And a final reminder that this webinar has been recorded, and we will post it on the challenge site. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.